is am I actually live? Because it never tells you if you're.
It says live on my end, so I think
Okay,
you are.
perfect. Perfect. Ooh, sorry. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm here with the lovely LaQuette, opposite side. It's reversed on my end. To talk about her Devereaux Inc. series, but the latest installment is A Secret Heir for Christmas. That's the fourth installment, and I'll let LaQuette take over from here because I want her to introduce herself and her books and things like everything like that. But thank you so much for gracing my channel because this is like huge for me because you're literally one of my favorite authors. This is huge.
Oh, thank you. So you're so sweet. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Anytime anyone wants to sit down and talk about my books, I'm always like, yay.
I will keep you here all day, but I know you're a busy woman, so I will keep you with for as long as you can stay. Oh no, did we freeze? Oh no, we didn't freeze. Okay. That must just be my internet. But how much, because I know from watching Erin's interview with you last year about the 3 previous books, how was it writing this book? I believe it's your first male, am I correct?
It's not my first male. It's my first male for Harlequin.
Okay.
So I have another book called Under His Protection, which was written for a publisher that shall not be named.
Got it.
Publicly. And
got it.
That situation didn't work out so well, so I got the rights back to it and republished it as a self-published book. And I've always loved, like, I just love love, and I love writing about people falling in love. And when this series was initially like being pitched, my editor at the time, Charles Greensman, hi Pat.
That's in the UK. Hi Pat.
My editor at the time, he said to me, I would like you to write me a story that features an affluent Black family from Brooklyn. And my response was, so you want me to write you Black Dynasty, but set in Brooklyn?
That's like pretty much what it is.
Yeah. And so he said, actually, yeah, that is exactly what I want. So I'm sorry, there's my sunroof is doing like some weird lighting thing. But he, that once he said that, like, I grew up on Dynasty. I loved Dynasty, the 1980s show, not the remake.
The original.
Yeah, and I grew up on like soap operas, so this was just like sort of my catnip. Like, I instinctively knew how to do this. And but I was a little hesitant when these talks were being had, because at the time I didn't really see that Harlequin was like producing anything that sort of looked or sounded like what I was writing. Right? I hadn't seen that very many plus size heroines. And all in the first 3 books are all about plus size heroines, right? And
the covers on these books are just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, they are. They are absolutely gorgeous. They did a wonderful job on them. And I definitely hadn't seen anyone writing about Brooklyn from the perspective that I saw Brooklyn, right? Like, when other writers write about it, it's very much the gentrified version of Brooklyn that, that exists today. But it's not I grew up in Brooklyn and I know where all the good places are.
All the little spots nobody knows about.
Exactly. So I really wanted to make this series as Black and as Brooklyn as I can. And one, because I just really wanted to put that out there, but 2, because I really wanted to see if Harlequin was going to be true to their word when it came to supporting this series. Because again, I was not interested at all in sort of like whitewashing this series to make it more palatable to non-Black, non-POC, non-Brooklynite readers. And so to their credit, they were so supportive. They've been so supportive of this series, and I absolutely adore how it's turned out from start to finish.
It's fantastic. And I love, like, this is book 4, so spoiler warnings ahead. But I love how, like, you give your characters backstory and they deal with trauma, but that's not the only thing that defines them.
Yes. So
Like,
yeah,
go ahead.
I very much hate the struggle story, and what
Right.
that is for me is where the struggle is steeped in the character's identity, right? Whatever their social construct identity is. So, for instance, if it's a Black person, their struggle has to do with topics that are largely talked about as the detriment to the Black community. Same thing if they're LGBTQ plus, or if they're, if they have a disability. And yes, those things are important, but I don't think those things define who we are. Like, our struggle is a very important part of our journey, but it doesn't define who we are. And so I often, when I write books about diverse people, I don't focus on their identity as with respect to struggle. I write joy, and I write joy that is expected and accepted, right? There's no explanation for that joy. It just is, because
It's just
one
there.
of the things I've always asked the question is, especially when it comes to writing Black heroines, is why can't Black women just be? Like, why do we always have to climb out of the muck and mire in order to earn our love?
Right.
Like, why can't we just be fabulous and have love
There are
walk
beautiful
into
dresses.
our life, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, and the same goes for why can't LGBTQ plus just be happy and have joy, and be, welcoming of that love. And I just don't believe that you have to have struggle in order to write a compelling story about people. And oftentimes, it's not that the struggle story in and of itself is bad. That's not what I'm saying, because we should know about the struggles of people from marginalized communities.
It's important.
It's important.
Yeah.
But it's the only perspective we get of marginalized communities. We don't get a full perspective that shows them in every range and phase of their lives, right? Everyone who belongs to that group is always struggling, and struggling because of their identity. So I don't write books like that. I try very hard not to. And so these characters, both Stefan and Carter, and all of the characters in the main characters in the previous books, they all are having a personal struggle of some sort, but it's not generally to do with their Blackness or their sexual identity or gender identity or ability or any of those things.
Yeah, that's what I loved about this, is they were just like, Stefan's gay. Okay. Like, he's accepted anyway. Like, that's, unfortunately, you don't see that as much as you should, I think.
You're right on time, Ashma. Right on time.
You're not late. This is perfect time for all my UK friends. But I also really liked that you paid respect to their past stories. Like, Carter is a widower, and Stefan has trust issues, understandably, because he was blackmailed by a former partner. So, like, I like how you balance it with, like, you completely understand why they're hesitant, and they have a reason to be hesitant, but, like, they also want to move on.
Yeah. Well, I don't really like to write. I always like to write hope into a story.
Yes.
And I think as human beings, we are multifaceted, and I think we can be all those things that can sometimes seem conflicting all at once, right? And the truth of the matter is, when Carter and Stefan meet, neither one of them are looking for a relationship. They're both dealing with their own personal struggles related to loss, right? That's the real struggle in this book is finding a way to deal with loss, whether you've already lost that person or whether it's you're about to lose that person.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at grief from different perspectives, from someone who had everything snatched away from them at once to someone who is watching that thing slowly be taken away from them one day at a time.
And they're both very
And
valid.
and they're both very valid experiences. So it's looking, this book is really about looking at the depth and perspective of grief, the different perspectives of grief, and how people process that, right? Because it's never a definite process. It's always changing, it's always evolving, and it grows with you.
Yeah. And I really like that you had his daughter, Nevaeh, involved, because a lot of romances with people with children, you either never see the kid or the kid talks like it's 30. Like, I love how, like, she was still wise. Like, I believe you said in the book, I highlighted it. They were having a conversation about her mother who passed away.
Mhm.
And she was like, yes, but I want you to be happy too.
Mhm.
Like, and he said, out of the mouth of babes. And my dad says that all the time. And I was like, you never see that. Like, but she can still be a kid. Like, she wants to be spoiled by her grandmother. Like, like she's still a kid.
I love Nevaeh too, and actually, like, we get to see Nevaeh as much as we do, much to the credit of my editor, John Jacobson. They are amazing. And so the first version of the book I wrote, um, John says, "Hey, we need to see the daughter more. Like, Carter is very much attached to and protective of his daughter.
Mhm.
It would make sense that he's not going to really allow Stefan into his life unless he can see how Stefan and his daughter bond."
Yeah.
And so it was very important to me then to try to figure out ways to make them bond that seemed organic, right? That
Mhm.
were like when they the first few times that they meet, the little girl is just being a precocious little girl. Like,
Yeah.
kids don't care about your feelings. They just gonna say what's on, what's on their minds. And
Mhm.
that's pretty much how she was. She's like,
Yeah.
"Sister, can I have my dog? Like, you got my dog ran in your house. Can you just get my dog, please? I don't really want to get arrested."
I'll leave you alone. Just can I get my dog?
Right. That's all she cares about. And I think the second time they meet, she's like, "My daddy smiles a lot when he's around you. Like, do you smile when you're around my daddy? Do you like my daddy? Because my grandma says he smiles because he likes you so much, right?"
I
And
highlighted that whole section. I was like, it's just adorable.
right, like, because
So cute.
I think she's about 6 in the
Yeah.
story, and so as a 6-year-old, they really don't have the full emotional grasp of what's going on, or rather, they might not have the language to really express it. But kids are smart; they're very
Yeah.
perceptive, and so she perceives the change in her father because she sees that he's not as sullen as he has always been previously, because he's
Mhm.
now found this new friendship with Stefan. So for her, it's not even about like, "Oh, my daddy's falling in love." Like, she never really looks at it like that. It's like, "Oh, this person makes my daddy smile, and I like it when my daddy smiles. So I want
Yeah.
this person to be around more." Right. And
Yeah.
so getting to see those moments where Carter and Stefan bond, and where she has these little small moments that are really tiny but very powerful with Stefan. I thought it was the best way that I could use the character without making her a nuisance in the story.
Yeah. I loved the one section, I believe it's in the middle, where she basically complains about how her dad does her hair. So Stefan offers to do her hair. I was like, that is such a cute, like, 6-year-old. My dad doesn't do my hair the way I like. Do you mind doing it? Like, it was just like, and then you just see the panic go on Carter's face, and Stefan just does it. I love that scene. It was one of my favorites because you never get to like see those little moments of like dad struggling to raise a daughter. and the things you
I
wouldn't
mean,
think you were struggling with.
and he has a great help, right? His
Yeah,
mother-in-law, his late wife's mother, lives with
the
him,
mother-in-law was my favorite. She was my
and
favorite side character.
and and she's close, but at that moment, and she usually takes care of those things for
Yeah.
Nevaeh, but she's out of town when this particular scene happens. And so Nevaeh is like, I want my hair braided, but my daddy is trash at it. And, so now I got to walk around with this jinky ponytail,
Yeah.
all day long. And so Stefan is like, well, listen, I know how to braid hair, right? Like my cousin and I, we were the only, kids that were sort of the same age. And
Hmm.
so we sort of learned to braid hair because, all of the other adults were so much older than us, and we didn't really have like any older cousins to sort of guide us. So we sort of learned to like do each other's hair. And, I used to keep my hair braided when I was a teenager, and we always did each other's hair. So if
Hmm.
if your dad's okay with it, let's go get some supplies. Let's go get some beads. We'll have you looking good, girl, by the end of this, situation.
That was such a sweet bonding moment for them. Like that didn't involve Carter per se.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was there, but it was just a specific moment for Nevaeh and Stefan.
It is, and it's also a moment for Carter to feel like he can allow someone else into her life, right?
Exactly.
Because he has guarded her so carefully because of the way he lost his wife.
Yeah.
And now he's starting to realize that in trying to guard her so carefully, he's really sheltered her in a way that's probably not as healthy as it could be.
Hmm.
So, her getting to meet Stefan and open up to him and have this relationship with someone that's not blood related to her, it's a really good experience for both her and Carter.
And I also love like the family love of the Devereaux. Like even though the rest of the characters that you covered in your previous three books are not the focus, you still see them. You still like. I love how he refers to Lyric as the sister in love instead of sister in law. Like I might steal that. Like I love
I
it.
actually, that's what I actually use to refer to my sister-in-laws, because well, technically they're my, sister-in-laws because I'm married to their brother or their brother-in-law.
Right.
But we don't refer to each other like that. We refer to each other as sisters in love. And so I really wanted to sort of denote that their relationship was much more than the marriage connection. Like being married to his brother didn't make them brother and sister. It was
Yeah.
the way that they just loved each other from the moment she came into the family, because she's closer in age to Stefan than she was to her husband. Her husband
Right.
was like 20 something years older than she was. So when she comes into
Her
the
story.
family, yes, when Lyric comes into the family, she is really she and Stefan and Amara and Jeremiah are the four of them are all on the same age range.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sort of like come together to sort of form this sort of, I call them sibling cousins, because they're technically cousins, but they're more like siblings in the way that they connect and treat each other.
Yeah.
And then Trey comes along much later and instantly falls into that dynamic as well.
Quickly too. It was just like there's a spot here for you. Slide right in.
It's true. It's true. I really enjoy like writing family. Most of my books have like familial ensemble
That's why
cast.
I think I love your books is I come from a huge family. So that
Same.
this is like the normal. Like
Yeah.
nobody understands unless you come from a huge family that this is normal.
It is, and there's always there's always someone around. There's always noise. There's always someone in your business. Like there's no secrets. There's
Yeah.
no you can't. Right? You can't.
I live
You
miles
can't
and
be a,
miles away from my family and people they still find out. So
right. So
there's nothing.
there's not, there. I mean, for the most part, you can't, unless you're intentionally hiding a secret like Stefan is doing. You can't really keep a secret in a family like that. So
Yeah.
it becomes it's fun to write these characters because all of their dynamics are a little bit different, right? Like Stefan, when he's with his family and when he's with the public, he's this really outgoing, like loud, boisterous person that draws attention to himself. But when he's with Carter, he's this very reserved, quiet person that Carter has to almost draw out of himself in
Yeah.
order to for them to make a connection.
And I love their dynamic because like they're both fighting it, and you can just like that's the one thing I yelled in your book. I actually wrote a note. I was like, just admit you both like each other. But I understand why you don't admit it because like you both have issues from your past, and I get it. But just admit you like each other.
It's a little bit hard. I mean, that's easier said than done.
I know.
There's a lot at stake for them both, right? Like Carter he has to figure out how to let go of his, I won't say loyalty to, but his fidelity to his wife. He has to, come to the point in his life where he understands that although he was married and he loved his wife, she's gone, and so he's free to emotionally move on. And I think for him, like it wasn't even the physicality of it because Carter mentions that he has had other lovers here and there, since his wife died 5 years
Right.
before. It's just he's never made an emotional connection with anyone. And I think he feels that is much more of a threat to the love that he shared with his wife. And
Yeah.
so when he meets Stefan, who instantly just does something, there's this connection there that he can't explain and draws something out of Carter that makes him want to take care of Stefan. It really throws him for a loop because he to a certain degree feels like he's emotionally cheating on his wife, who logically we know that's not the
Right.
case, but that doesn't mean that that's not what he feels like.
Yeah, you completely understand the feeling of
Yeah,
emotionally cheating because like you could tell he loved his wife. And that's one thing I love about your writing is that like even though the story isn't about his wife, you still understood their connection, why they fell in love and why they were together for so long before she passed away.
oh, I think oftentimes when I read characters who are in some way separated from their previous spouse, it usually falls into one or two categories. Either the spouse has unfortunately passed away, or especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus men, um, there's usually this sense of the evil girlfriend or ex who was such a bitch.
Right.
All right. And I don't like to write those those sorts of perspectives because
Mm-hmm.
love and relationships are a lot more complicated than that. They're not so, black and white. And so I wanted people to know that he's a good guy. Like he absolutely adored his wife when he was with her. When they were together, there was no one else in this world
Right.
for him, and there was no one else that could possibly turn his head when his wife was alive. But it's been 5 years since his wife
Yeah.
passed, right? So he he is way beyond the point where he should feel okay to move on. But that's a hard thing. Like even when the world tells you, because his family has been telling him for a while that,
Even his
hey,
mother-in-law.
yeah, like it's okay for you to put yourself back out there and start dating again. And it's just something that's so hard for him to do because in his head, he sort of feels like if I do start to fall in love with someone else, that means I have to
Let her go.
erase or
Yeah.
forget my wife. And I didn't want Stefan's love to threaten that. I wanted him to be able to still have the beauty of the love he shared with his late wife and still make room for this new love with Stefan. And that was my hope, and I really hope I accomplished that
You did.
in kind of showing that distinction that love is continuous.
Mm-hmm.
It may change form, but it's continuous, and that we can have multiple forms. We can experience multiple forms of love simultaneously.
I think it was in their second like conversation that he was like, I can tell you're grieving and I'm grieving in a different way. So like, tell me what your like hangups are. And it was just like a very interesting, like first real conversation, but like more realistic to, I think, a lot of relationships nowadays.
Well, I mean, these last few years in the world have not been easy on any of us.
Yeah.
And grief has been a huge part of that, the just human experience over the last few years. I mean, grief has always been part of the human experience, but I think it's been much more heightened during these past few years with the pandemic and all of these other things. And so it was really important to me to sort of show them at different spaces in their grief. Because I think there's this misconception about grief that when you lose something, you grieve and you mourn for this, dedicated amount of time. And then after a while, you sort of move on and then everything is wonderful again. And that's not really how grief works.
No.
Like my grandfather he passed away 21 years ago. And there's some days I'm great, and there's some days where I still feel the loss of his presence so strongly. It's almost like I'm back to that day when I
Yep.
learned he had passed away.
And
So
it's always very odd things too. It's like
yes.
a smell can like
Mm-hmm.
the other day I smelled like the tobacco my grandfather used to smoke. And I haven't smelled that in 15 years. And
Exactly. So it's always, I wanted people to see that even though Carter, he has made it past that portion of the grief where it was so debilitating that he never believed he could get beyond it. But it's still there, right? It's still keeping him from moving on. It's still keeping him over being, making him be so overprotective of his daughter because of the way he loses his wife. And it's really becoming a hindrance. He has to learn to sort of let it go a little bit. And for Stefan is grieving in a different way. Like this pending grief can be paralyzing, right?
yeah.
The knowing someone is sick, knowing that the inevitability of their death is coming, knowing you can't stop that. And then on top of that, once you experience it, then having to go through this compounded sort of grief where they're gone now, and now you have to sort of deal with it. Because I think we have this idea that if you know someone is going to die, you prepare yourself for it. And the truth is, there's no preparation for that.
No.
Like
No.
you can think you're preparing yourself, but there's really no way to really emotionally prepare yourself for that. So it was very important to me to show their different experiences with grief, to show that grief does appear differently, and in some people, where Carter's response to grief is to control everything around him, to hold on to everything very tightly. And Stefan's response to grief is to push everything and everyone away.
Yep.
And to keep it to himself. And so they're going through very similar things emotionally, but in very distinctly different ways. And I think that's what makes them such a good pairing.
Yeah.
Because they can sort of help each other through those situations back and forth.
And Ace is tricky because he knew what he was doing when he asked Stefan to do this, to set up this Christmas party. Like he wanted him to, like, in a way, I guess, move past the fact that he knows his uncle is dying and move on, but not in the traditional sense of like just find. I think he said, "I just want you to be happy. Like find happiness." Because
I want you to find. I want you to find joy. I want you to have that joy. I don't want you sitting at my bedside waiting for me to die. I want you to go out and live life. And he even goes as far as to, tell him, don't come back here. I don't want to see you again until you have something joyous to tell me when you see me next. And it frustrates Stefan because he's like, we have like a finite amount of time left,
right,
and you're pushing me away. And he doesn't realize that Ace isn't really trying to push him away. He's just trying to show him that his life cannot be about carrying the emotional burdens, solely about carrying the emotional burdens of his family. He has to
Especially when it
have,
comes to his brother.
especially when it comes to his brother, he has to have someone that's there to sort of hold him up when he's trying to hold the family up.
Right.
And Stefan, that doesn't really compute to Stefan because in his head he has sort of come to the conclusion that if he can't do his job as the family secret bearer and protect
Mm-hmm.
his family, then there's no use for him in the family. Then the family won't want to be around him, right? So he doesn't think the fact that he's gay is what's going to push his family away. He thinks it's him being able to protect him from, family secrets that will decide whether they truly love him or not. And he's not willing to risk that, right?
Yeah.
He needs that so much. He's afraid to risk it and take that chance by telling them the truth.
And you see how it like inadvertently affects his relationship with the rest of the family. Like it affects his relationship with his mother because the white lie that he told his mother to protect her made her hate her brother.
Yes. And so these little tendrils of family drama, it's usually how it really, happens in real
Mm-hmm.
life, right? Did he lie because he just didn't want to be truthful with his mother about, the circumstances of his brother's death? No, he lied to protect them.
Yeah.
And he knows that because of the kind of relationship that like his brother was the apple of his mother's eye,
Mm-hmm.
and he knew that losing, not just losing him almost broke her, but losing her idea of him
Yeah.
would have destroyed her. And the same for his sister-in-law, like losing the idea of who her husband was. He didn't think that she could handle that, and he didn't want her to have all these unanswered questions that would come about because of the circumstances of her husband's death. Because he felt like it would be something that would gut her, and he loved these people too. And to his credit, he feels that when you love people, you protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this subterfuge is not really born out of a sense of keeping secrets so much as it is to protect his family from more pain, because his brother's death really rocks the family in a way that they did
Yeah.
not expect.
But I really like when he finally like feels right after he has an argument with, I don't even know if you want to call it an argument, but he basically lies by omission by not telling Carter that he is part of the family because he doesn't want to have a partner or a friend just because he has a ton of money.
Not just that, but also the fact that he knows Carter has a fear of fame. He has a
Right.
fear of celebrity. He has a fear because he was an actor. He did have all of this fame, and that fame cost him his wife's life. And
In
so
an awful way.
in a really terrible way, and that he blames himself for, and he blames himself in the sense that he feels like if he had not been a famous actor, he would never have brought this on to his wife.
Right.
And so he, you know, he, because of that, is like, I want nothing to do with, I don't want fame in my personal life, right? He does create a bar, lounge, restaurant where really wealthy people and celebrities can come, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a private club. You can't take in cell phones or AV equipment. You can't have, recording devices, because it's a place where he wants celebrities to be able to come and just be themselves and not have to worry about having a camera stuck in their face, or having to worry about their words being sort of twisted and taken out of context and blasted all over, the world or social media. And so that's his penance. He sort of provides that for other celebrities because
Mm-hmm.
he did not have that for himself and his wife. And but he still has a very like no celebs in my personal life
Yeah,
sort of situation because
understandably.
yeah, because I don't want my daughter exposed to that, right? Like my daughter's not at my club, right? She's not going to be exposed to these people at my club.
Right.
But in my personal life, I don't want my child exposed to this world any longer. And so he does not know who Stefan. He knows who the Devereaux are. He's actually the
Yeah.
best friend of someone who is married into the Devereaux family. He's
Hmm.
married to Amara, who is Stefan's cousin. But because he's never had any interaction with the Devereaux clan other than Amara, he doesn't really know like who all the members of you
How it
know
encompasses
you
everybody
know
in yeah.
and so it's like we know who the Kennedys are,
Hmm.
but if we saw one of them walking down the street, could we really say, "Oh, that's this Kennedy," right?
Right.
Other than the most well-known ones that we know.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of where Stefan is. Like he's a Devereaux, but um he's not one of the publicly facing Devereaux that
Yeah.
everyone knows. And so when he meets Carter through happenstance, like through a real just sort of like accident, he meets Carter, it doesn't like it happens in such a normal everyday way that he he realizes really quickly what Carter has gone through and realizes that Carter is, he can't share who he is with Carter. And at the time, he doesn't really feel the necessity to, because he feels like there's not going to be someone who's really going to be in my life for a long
Hmm.
period of time. Like he's just helping me plan this party that my uncle is demanding. Um, and if we have a little fun on the side and get to know each other while we're doing that, that's fine. But it's never going to go beyond
Right.
planning this party, and it's never going to go beyond the physical. And so he feels like, okay, I don't really owe this person all of this
Yeah.
access to my life, but also, why am I going to throw that kind of turmoil into his life when I know that he's had such a tough time with fame?
Hmm.
And as the relationship develops and they become more deeply involved, then it becomes, I'm afraid to tell him because I know if I do, I'm going to lose him.
Yeah.
Which is, it's not the greatest perspective to have, but it's a very honest
Yeah.
perspective.
That's one thing I love about like your, I don't want to say third act breakup, but like that concept in romances of the third act breakup. A lot of the times, like it doesn't make sense, but like when they have the fight in the limo, it makes sense because you understand where they're both coming from.
Hmm. Yeah, like
And
you understand Carter's innate need to protect himself and his family from this
mhm,
world that has taken so much from him. But then you also understand Stefan's need to keep his secrecy about his identity, because his identity, you know, made him a target for blackmail when he let someone in and let someone know not only who he was, but his family's intimate secrets.
mhm,
And so he just can't experience that again. Like he doesn't want to go through that. He doesn't want to experience that, but he also doesn't want to allow his family to be targeted again. And so his natural reaction is to just keep everything inside.
yeah, which is not the best way, but you also understand because like we
Hmm.
all do it to a certain extent.
Yeah. We all compartmentalize in some
Yeah,
form. And I think these two men have been so used to compartmentalizing in their lives, especially Stefan, that it's become second nature. They don't even realize when they're doing it. And they have to actively break themselves of that habit in
yeah,
order to sort of find each other.
and I know I'm jumping around, but like the discussion of food in this made me want to like eat everything. Like I was like, man, I miss growing. Like I used to live not too far from a restaurant that would make those dishes, so it was just making me want to like take a trip home just to eat that food.
Well, that's one of the great things about Brooklyn is that you can find like so many different types of food there
Hmm.
because Brooklyn is a really eclectic place where there's so many diverse communities. Even within those communities, there's still diverse communities. And so you can find some of every type of food. And food is a really um, low pressure way to sort of experience other people's cultures. And I really enjoy like talking about food because generally like food brings people together.
Hmm.
And so for this situation, like Carter is trying to help him give his uncle this one last thing, his final wish, which is to have all of his family together for Christmas and have an old fashioned Christmas party. And he wants to have like some of those cultural dishes and some of the dishes that are significant to some of the other cultures in Brooklyn. So you have a lot of Southern food, soul food, you have a lot of Caribbean food. Carter himself is from the Caribbean, he's Puerto Rican. And
Hmm.
so he's able to sort of bring in his Latinx, Caribbean background and sort of create a fusion of all these types of food in terms of the food he presents for the party. And what that does is it really shows how he's listening to Stefan, right? He's
Hmm.
listening to everything Stefan is telling him about what his uncle likes and what he enjoys and what, what he would need to make this perfect. Um, and he's listening to every single one of those things and trying his best to figure out a way to tick those boxes off for Stefan.
It's like those are my favorite scenes. Is like when they're getting to know each other, but like through a I don't want to say third party, but because of this party, they're getting to know each other and
Hmm.
how each person ticks and the fact that Carter loves to cook. Like when he made, I believe it was paella,
Hmm.
which is one of my favorite things in the world, and it made my mouth water every time reading it. um, but like when he made him, to me, when someone makes you something that's from their specific culture, that's love on a plate,
it
regardless of
really
what background you're from.
it really is. And it's also like traditionally when someone passes away, oftentimes, you know, the community tries to take a little bit of the load off the family by cooking for them and bringing
Hmm.
them food so they don't, that's one thing they don't have to worry about. And so it was also this sort of way of taking care of Stefan in these moments where he's so grief ridden and he's not taking care of himself. So Carter steps in and is like, hey, let's have this meal together while we discuss this plan, right? It's his way of sort of taking care of Stefan, but also making Stefan feel safe at the same
Yeah,
time. Because for Carter, safety is everything. So he wants to give that to the people he cares about.
I just love like in different parts of the book you talk about different types of food, like the fried chicken in the first chapter when they accidentally have their meat cube. Like we all have that one place that we know is really bad, but we all have that like one comfort food that you know is really horrible for you, but like you can't get it anywhere else, so you specifically go to this one spot because
It's
you know it's
true.
fantastic. And
It's always a little hole in the wall spot
yep,
that couldn't pass a health inspection if you tried.
exactly.
And but the food is delicious.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't want to know what's in there. Just give me the food. That's all
Yep.
I don't need to know what's behind that screen. Just give me the
Give me the
food.
dirty wings.
And that's exactly why they call them dirty wings
Yeah.
because you have no idea what's going on in that bag.
I want
they
to be
don't even let
obliviously happy eating my food.
they don't even let you see. And this is like a real thing in Brooklyn. You have these little chicken spots
Hmm.
that are they just sell like chicken and fries and milkshakes and burgers, right? They're sort of
Yeah.
off brand to all of the like major fast food spots, and they're also a lot less expensive. And so growing up in the hood, like you could get like the after school special was 3 wings and some fries for like $3. And
Perfect.
so if you're a broke kid like I
Yeah.
was, that was like you were eating good. And
Yeah.
You know, but as a kid, you're not thinking about health and what's good for you. You're not even thinking about what could be crawling in the back where they
No,
keep the
you're just like,
kitchen
this
like
tastes good.
cordon off. It's like, this is amazing, and I'm just gonna enjoy that. And as an adult, when you go back to enjoy those things, you have to forcibly refuse to acknowledge
Yeah.
what's wrong with it in order to enjoy it. And that's Stefan was having that kind of day where it was like, you
It was
know
great.
what? I don't even care. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
eat it because I need that feel good,
The comfort food.
that comfort that comes with eating this stuff.
Like he was like he said something along the lines of, I've been to the best restaurants in Paris, but you can't beat a red slushy and dirty wings.
Exactly.
I was like, I feel you.
It's true.
It's so
It
great.
really is true.
But I also love, like, even though they're not they're side characters, like the mother-in-law was very present. Like when they did have their fight and their miscommunication. Um, the scene that made me cry the most was the scene where he was leaning on her knee and she was rubbing his head, and she was telling him to that you can not let my daughter go, but like you can move on as well.
Yeah, and I think he needed that, right? Because her mother, oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Um,
Hi.
I I you know, when you are in Carter's experience, especially, he's been holding on to his wife's memory for so long as a
Mhm.
lifeline. Um, and for very good reasons, because he has a small daughter and he wants her to have some influence of her mother and her life, even though she was only a year old when her mom died.
Mhm.
But her grandmother, her mother's mother, being present there, it's almost like to some degree that her presence makes Carter feel like he still has to act like a married man, like he
Yeah.
still, because her mother is still alive and he still needs to respect that bond.
Mhm.
And his mother-in-law finally saying to him, like, my daughter is gone and I love her and I will forever ache at that loss, but I know that when she was here, you loved her to distraction. You gave her everything that I would have wanted my daughter to have in a partner. And my daughter had a big enough heart that she would want you to love someone again after her, because the thing that made her fall in love with you was the fact that you had such a big heart and you always put other people first.
Yeah.
And a
Like
heart like that, like,
I just waterworks. Like that whole scene, I was just a mess.
yeah, I really enjoyed writing that scene because I also wanted people to, know, because sometimes in-laws are always written with this sort of adversarial,
Awfulness.
perspective. And I wanted them to be a real family. Like they had been through some real trauma together and some real loss together. And I wanted her to, like one of the reasons she came out there to live with him and moved her life was because she wanted to help Carter move on. She
Mhm.
wanted to help her granddaughter and her former son-in-law, move on and get to a healthier place. And that was the thing that Carter needed to let go. It was the permission almost that he needed to finally feel everything he was feeling for Stefan without guilt attached to it.
And it was such a little scene, but it packed so much emotional weight to it
Hmm.
that it just that was one of my favorite scenes in the book.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
And if you don't mind, if we go to, because I know in previous interviews that I've seen of yours, and the previous interview that I'm speaking of is connected into the description. My friend Aaron interviewed LaQuette about this time last year, and you spoke about how this series you only had 3 written,
Hmm.
but they wanted 3 more. And sadly, the Desire line is ending in December, which makes me so sad.
Yeah.
It makes me so sad. So, are we still getting the two books that are you're were contracted to, because all the previous books were Desire books?
Yes. So because Desire is ending unfortunately next month, um, I still had um, two books left on my contract that I needed to fulfill, and so I had a meeting with Harlequin, and they just we talked about some ways in which I could do that, and one of the ways they were suggesting was because they were opening a new line,
Mm-hmm.
and that new line just wasn't at the moment that it was happening. It wasn't quite the fit for me with everything I had going on in my life. I wasn't going to
Okay.
be able to commit to it, and so I another proposal was that okay, well maybe you can take those two books and move them to another series line, and they, I think, initially suggested romantic suspense, which I have written romantic suspense before, and I do have romantic suspense books out. But I saw someone just mention Jackson. Jackson is one of those romantic suspense books.
Jackson was the first
Um,
book that I read from you. Actually, that was the first book my friend Steph from Steph's Romance Book
I love
um,
Stephanie.
recommended it to me, and that's actually like in 2019. That was the first book I listened to the audio, and I was like, I'm sold. This woman can write anything, and I will buy
Oh,
it.
thank you. You're so good for my confidence. I thought about it and I was just like, nah, I'm not really feeling like I'm really in a romantic suspense mood. And romantic suspense for Harlequin category is a little bit different than what I would do for romantic suspense in a trade or a single title book. And so I was just like, I don't know about this. It doesn't really feel like, such a good fit for me. Um, and also because I tend to write hotter love scenes. And so
And
that's all.
your spice level is absolutely perfect. I just yeah.
So
Okay.
that's something that has to be considered for the line,
Mm-hmm.
what's right for the line. And romantic suspense didn't necessarily have their line doesn't really have that high heat like that.
No.
So I really felt like Presents was the only line that was really comparable to Desire with the explicit nature of sex and the
Yeah.
heat level of sex. And so we talked about it, and I gave them a sample of this new sort of spin-off series from the Devereaux that features um, Raina and Regina Devereaux, which both names mean queen. So
Oh, I love that.
they're identical twin sisters. You have Raina, and then you have Regina, and those names both mean queen. So their names are literally both Queen Devereaux,
I love
and
it. I
and
love it so much.
and they each under very different circumstances um end up married to the sovereigns of different nations for very suspect reasons on both parts.
That makes it fun.
Like it's there's some shenanigans going on and some deal making going on where the first um the first king is actually a prince and his father is ill. He needs to take his father's place as the heir to the throne, but there's some draconian law on the books that he has to be married to do that.
Mhm.
And his
I love that
parent
trope. I don't know why I
yeah
love that trope.
and his parents don't want him to just pick someone from the court just to fulfill the
Right.
obligation. So they want him to have a love match. So the only love match he could think of is his ex-girlfriend, Raina,
I
who
love
things
it.
ended very badly for them, but they really were in love. And so it would be the only woman that he could bring home, and his parents and his people would be accepting of this marriage. But the problem is, Raina doesn't know that he's royalty.
Okay.
So she,
Okay.
he makes some sort of backdoor deal with her. And unfortunately, she doesn't find out until it's too late that she is to become the queen of this nation.
Oh no.
She
She can't back out now.
can't back out. And her twin sister ends up in a sort of wrong twin situation where
Okay.
while Raina is away doing her thing, she asks her twin to sort of impersonate her for a few hours at an event that because she just needs her face to be there for their business purposes. And so, Regina agrees. Regina is the much more reserved twin, but she agrees
Okay.
to go pretend to be Raina for a couple of hours. But unfortunately, a few months later, after this, uh, unfortunately, she ends up, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, she ends up having a one night stand with this man that she doesn't know. And it's supposed to be all fun and games, and they have this one night stand. The problem comes in that, like 4 or 5 months later, Raina and her husband, now the king, are taking like a royal tour of
Hmm.
the world, and she's pregnant, visibly so, and discussing her pregnancy publicly on television and all of this. And this man who believes he slept with Raina and, and
The
doesn't know he
sisters.
actually slept with Regina
Yeah.
is now questioning whether she's trying to pass his baby off as her husband. So Raina
As a
basically,
legitimate, illegitimate thing.
exactly. So Raina basically calls her sister out and is like, "Listen, you slept with this man. You better fix this because this is not just like my boyfriend being skeptical of paternity. Like we're talking about like national issues, like war breaking out because of this. So I'm gonna need you to fix this." And the way she ends up having to fix this is by making a deal with the very austere king that sort of binds her to his side unexpectedly.
I love it. Is there dates for that yet, or
I don't have dates for it yet. I am going to be sending those books in probably around April and October of next year. So they probably won't come out at the earliest until like 2025 sometime, the first
okay?
one.
We've got
But
the early scoop.
I don't have dates yet, but it's never, I love it because it's very, you don't often get to read about Black royalty. And
Hmm.
oftentimes when we get royal stories, they're always based in very Eurocentric countries. And we never get to see um, Afrocentric royalty, and not necessarily African royalty, like continental African royalty, because
Hmm.
this country is not part of the continent of Africa. It's a separate island somewhere.
Okay.
Um, and it, it has its own history, and it's a beautiful history that it's, that I get to tell here. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm
I'm so
really
excited.
excited to get to write about two Black women becoming queens in their own right. And so I'm really excited about this series, and I hope you all love it too when you finally get to
Yeah,
read
I'm
it.
so excited to veer away from your not to your non-Harlequin books. Is there a sequel to this coming out?
Yes, I'm actually in edits with the second
Woo!
book, which is Janae and Adam's story.
I can't wait.
And they are a little bit problematic. They don't get along very much, but they have to figure it out.
Oh, I love your banters. They just shoots me all day.
Well, thank you.
But is there anything else that you're working on right now? Because I know when you spoke to Erin last year, you were talking about going back into writing for like writing, teaching writing for academia.
Yes, so I do teach writing. I teach a writing romance class for a traditional college. But I'm also I just started a PhD program where I am researching the negative impacts of what we call controlling images, which are
Mhm.
stereotypes that are used to describe Black women, and how that negatively impacts Black authors who are writing Black women, how it negatively impacts their ability to access publishing fully as their white counterparts do. So it's things are a little bit busy. So if y'all don't see me, I know you
Yeah.
don't see me online as much anymore, and that's just because I am knee deep in so much writing, whether that is academic writing or whether that is writing fiction. So there's not a lot of time left in the day for
Yeah.
me to be on social media. So I'm not ignoring y'all. I try to come back on every couple of weeks and say, hey, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
But but I really don't have the I just don't have the time. There isn't enough time in the day for me to be on social media as regularly as I was before.
I hope that they publish the work that you're working on because that sounds so interesting. Like I
Well, that
love
is the
research.
plan. That is the plan to have it
Hey, getting all the scoop.
published. I mean, I gotta complete it first. I
Yeah,
gotta at least
it's
another
gonna
three
take
and a half
time.
years before we get there. But it's that is the plan because I think as much information as we can have on this topic that's readily available to the public and to the industry, I think it only helps the situation.
Yeah. I don't want to keep you too long because I know you're a very busy woman. But I want to thank you so much for joining me on my channel. And I want to thank you for your books because they got me through the pandemic.
Oh,
Um, I moved where I live now in the middle of the pandemic. The only person I knew here was my mom. So, like, your books and everything helped me get through some really tough times. So, I want to thank you personally.
oh my gosh, you're gonna make me cry. Because in my older age, I find that I am a big crier now in a way that I never
I'm
was
the same way.
before.
I used to never cry, and I cry at everything now.
I do. I mean, that is really touching, and I am glad that if anything I have written has helped, get you through some of these difficult times that we're experiencing as members of the human race right now.
Yes.
Then my work has been fulfilled, and I'm so appreciative that you would share that with me.
Thank you very much, and I hope you'll come back when your books come out, and we can discuss further, and I can continue to gush and make a fool of myself.
You're not making a fool of yourself. This has been really fun, and I really do appreciate you having me on. And I'm willing to come on anytime. Just ask me,
Thank you
we'll
so
make it
much.
work.
Thank you for everybody watching now, and thank you for everybody watching the replay. The next thing that won't be on my channel, but I will be discussing. I have it right here. I guess I don't have it with me. Oh, here. Speaking of Harlequin, on Wednesday, the 8th, we will be discussing Closing In on Clues by Julianne Lindsay on my friend's channel who picked this book. It's actually my friend Nicole's, whose channel it is. This is her book. They actually, Julianne Lindsay used her name as the heroine. So we'll be discussing that on Wednesday the 8th on the Who Picked This Book Club channel. But thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for everybody watching on the replay. Oh, thank you. Indoorsy t-shirt. But thank you so much again, LaQuette, and I would be more than happy if you wanted to discuss your books later on when everything comes out and you're less busy.
Absolutely, we'll make it happen.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Bye bye.
Bye.